When you get asked to repeat yourself over and over again, it starts to chip away at that confidence inside you because you start to question, is it my English? Is it my grammar? Is it my pronunciation or accent? What is it? Why am I not being understood? So when that happens over and over and over again, it really starts to wear you down. Every time these things sort of happen, you start to think, I don't belong here. This is too hard. Is it ever going to get easier? Why did I leave my home country? You really start to question your whole existence or what you're doing, whether it was the right decision.
Hi everyone. Welcome back to another podcast episode of Poquillo, the podcast. I'm your host, Gabby Estrada, and today we have Amanda Boyce with us. Amanda, thank you so much for joining me.
Thanks, Gabby. Thank you so much for inviting me. I'm so excited to chat.
Something very cool for the audience, in case they don't know, because it's not very noticeable. So here it's 8 a.m. in the States, but for Amanda, which again, I appreciate the effort. What time is it over there and where you're located? Tell me about that.
So yes, it is 6:37 p.m. right now. I live in North India in a state called Chandigarh. I am Australian, but I live in India, which we'll get to in a bit, I'm sure.
Yes. I thought it was so cool and so fascinating to meet someone that lives over there and just get to know over time, like the culture, what you've been up to. And yes, that also sparked the conversation about like, what do you do? And, why you decided to move over there, which is, you got married, decided to relocate, which is amazing. And then we got into this interesting conversation around pronunciation and accent. Amanda, can you tell us a little bit more of how you got into pronunciation and like this field that is very niche, I would say, in my opinion?
Yes, it is very, very specialized, I would say. On the topic of pronunciation, it's so interesting Americans say niche because I would say niche. I didn't realize this was a difference in pronunciation till it was like last year, I think. But anyway, so yes, I started my business, Aussie English with Amanda, logo here. So it has been almost 3 years. It'll be 3 years at the end of April since I started my business, but I've been teaching English as a second language online for over 5.5 years. So I started teaching English. I was just quite bored actually here in India. It was the first year of the pandemic. Everywhere was locked down. I couldn't make any friends because of lockdowns, and I was really missing this kind of human connection and interaction. So I thought, let me try and find an online job where I can connect with people. And yes, that is how my teaching journey started. But after some time, people started to book me because they saw that I was Australian, and I started to hear the same kind of questions coming through or statements. I can't understand Australians. Why do they talk so fast? There's too much slang. I don't understand the culture. And that's when I realized, okay, Australian English is a thing, and there is a huge need for someone to be focusing on this part of English as a second language, the Australian accent or Australian English. So that's sort of how my business got started and grew. And I was really just drawn to the pronunciation and accent training side of it, as opposed to, say, teaching grammar for English or focusing just on slang and other parts of ESL or English as a second language. So yeah, I think the accent training side, I've really been focused on doing that for about 1.5 years, nearly 2 years. And yeah, that's sort of how it got started.
Wow, that is very interesting. Yeah, because we have another friend and she also does pronunciation and accent reduction in another, like, it's a UK English. I always forget.
Yes, so she does British English, exactly.
British.
She kind of does what I do, but British English, and she's been doing it for a lot longer than me, but she's a complete inspiration and a role model. And she's kind of where I aim to be and what I hope to achieve when I'm in that time of my business.
Yeah, no, it was just so interesting to see. I was like, wow, that's very specialized, but I do see, because I love to support businesses that are doing a positive impact on a
Mm-hmm.
personal or community level. And definitely businesses like these, I feel they make such a difference because I was telling you, right, that so English is not my first language. It's actually
Mm-hmm.
Spanish because my parents decided me to raise me with Spanish first, then English. And so I've noticed that, sometimes, especially when I get nervous, uh, I feel very unconfident at times, and I'm like, they're gonna notice that my English is not perfect. And so I think that's why we decided to chat. And also, when it came to it, it seems that a lot of it is with mindset. So I'm hoping we can dig into that later in the conversation. But I guess to get started, my first question that I have for you is let's talk about the elephant in the room. We've already kind of mentioned it, accent bias. What are
Mm.
you seeing with your clients? How is
Mm-hmm.
their accent actually affecting their professional lives?
Mm.
Because a lot of them, right, they probably work in they have leadership roles and
Yeah.
expectations. So could we dive into that?
Yeah. Yes, yes, very, very good question. So, I think to begin with, it's really important to make the distinction, which you actually said before, that there is a difference between accent and pronunciation. So, accent is more about what you sound like overall, the pattern of sound, which is like your melody, your rhythm, and the stress when you talk.
Mm.
Pronunciation is more about how you say those things. So, how you
Mm.
articulate specific sounds, the syllables, and words. So they are very similar and there is an overlap, but accent is tied to your identity and where you're from. I have an Australian accent because I'm from Australia, and pronunciation is more of a technical skill and it's learnable. So it's
Wow.
learnable, it's trainable. Yes. So what I work on with my clients is more about pronunciation as opposed to changing someone's accent. Because as you said, accent bias is real, it's a thing. So to those who don't know what accent bias is, it's usually like an unconscious and usually negative judgment and stereotyping based on someone's accent or speech patterns, foreign accent. Even in some cases in the UK, there's, I think, something like over 50 different types of British accents.
Oh,
And even
wow.
some accents, yeah, even some accents in the UK are perceived as lower class compared to other accents. So it's not even just foreign accents, it's accents of a specific region or country too. Yeah. So it's this often negative judgment of those accents rather than how people actually communicate. So in my clients, it shows up in ways where they are very technically skilled and yet they're passed over for a promotion. Or maybe their manager in a monthly catch up or a performance review says that they need to work on their communication skills, but it's very vague. What does that look like? And at times it's been their accent. So also things like ideas being ignored in meetings, but then someone else could say the exact same thing and people are listening and applauding and recognizing those ideas. So it's these little kind of aspects that come up, but when they keep happening over and over and over again, it starts to impact that person's confidence. Yeah.
For sure. Yeah, so on one level, it affects you professionally because maybe you can't go up the ladder as fast or even go up
Mm,
at all. But then on the other hand, as you said, internally, your confidence, it starts dropping, like,
yeah.
asking questions internally. And yeah, that can be really, really bad.
Mm,
Actually, I just when you said like someone could just say the comment of like you just need to improve your communication skills, like they're not even specific.
mm,
Because I wonder if that might be considered like racist or not sure per se, but it's
yeah.
if they give more detailed feedback, they would actually know what to work on, right? But I guess it's kind of a
Yeah.
thin, fine line to cross.
Exactly. Yes. And that's where discrimination does play a part in this, right? So if they keep it vague, you need to work on your communication skills. You have to communicate better. They're keeping it very vague. But as soon as you mention something like accent, that's when discrimination can come into play. So I think, again, it's that unconscious bias. They probably don't think that their managers or HR or whatever it is might not think that they're really focusing on the accent, but internally that's what they're sort of thinking about.
Mm, yeah, because and when you said like, different types of accents, they think like, oh, lower class versus higher class. Like I actually
Mm,
just was working with a client, and she was telling me about a problem she had. She was trying to get a contract notarized, and the person that she went to just saw the paper and say like, oh no, this is wrong. Like I can't do it. And I was like I can see the paperwork that you're submitting. Everything seems correct. And I was like, what is going on? The only thing that I can think of is that, so for this person, English and Spanish is her second language. For her first language is actually, I wouldn't even say it's a dialect from Guatemala, because
mm-hmm.
she was originally like from I think you call it like a Indian tribe. I'm not sure the
Like a
correct
native
name.
tribe.
And so you kind of see, right, her, you can hear her
Mm,
accent, and I'm like, did was she discriminated? And I felt so bad
mm,
because now she has to do like all of this things to show something
mm.
that I where it's already demonstrated in that, in those papers. So I
Yeah,
guess it does happen more than I would think, and it's,
yeah,
yeah, it's a negative impact.
yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Oh, I'm sorry that happened to your client. That's so tough.
Yeah, yeah, but I guess, do you have, maybe before we go to the next question, do you have a specific
Mm,
example from, I'm guessing, I'm wondering if, since you live in India, a lot of your
mm.
clients from that area, or are they from all over the world?
Yes, actually, that's a really good question because when I first started teaching English, or I started Aussie English with Amanda, I didn't really mention I lived in India. I don't know, I just felt like I don't know, I felt like a bit weird saying it because I felt weird calling myself an immigrant, even though that's what I am, and I'm an immigrant here. But I felt like I
Yeah.
maybe wasn't allowed to because I was white. Like I had my own internal biases that I had to work through. I
Mm.
wasn't an expat, so I just felt like a bit weird that maybe I wasn't allowed to teach Australian English from India. I don't know. It was just like my own
Oh,
insecurities. So,
yeah.
yeah, mostly I had always focused my clientele to be like, I focused my business and attracting clients from Australia because Australian English. And so a lot of people assume, the reason I mentioned this is a lot of people assume that because I live in India, it's because I have Indian clients or Indian students. And no, so most of my students actually do happen to be from India, but it's just happened that way. But they're all living in Australia. But half, I think, are from India. The rest are either from Latin America or other parts of Asia.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because before I got to know you deeper, I thought, I was like, wow, that's so smart. Like she started her business and she relocated there on purpose. But that's not the
Mm,
case after I learned more of like the
yeah.
background, moved there.
Hmm.
So yes, we
Yeah.
made an assumption there. But that is so cool. So I'm guessing when they decide to work with you, it's because they are interested in improving pronunciation and accent in the Australian realm.
Yeah, exactly. So it's more so that they can communicate better in Australia. And when it comes down to changing accents or fixing accents, something that I do try and explain to people is that there are specific sounds or ways of your speaking that will need to be sort of adapted or trained, so to speak, to sound, I guess, more natural in Australia. So you're not removing your accent or trying to change who you are or removing your identity. It's just making some subtle changes in order to communicate better. I do it here. I have to do it here. It's very hard for me to go and speak to someone outside with my Australian accent because they don't have exposure to that. They're not able to understand it very clearly. And I'm going to keep getting asked, what? What did you say? What did you say? Then it affects my confidence because it's like, do they not understand me? Am I not speaking clearly? So I adapt my pronunciation because it's a part of learning Hindi anyway. I have to understand the pronunciation, and that crosses over into the way I speak English here. So
Yeah.
it's the same with my clients. What's what I say to them, that when we work together, we listen for correct pronunciation, for one, just to make sure that they are pronouncing words and sounds correctly, and making some subtle changes or differences to the way they say words or sounds or the way that they speak to sound more natural and to communicate more effectively.
Yeah, and I remember when I was asking you, like, I was like pronunciation, and you were like, it can be as simple as like speaking slower, or right, like there's a lot
Yeah.
of techniques because a lot of
Yes.
it. Some when I get nervous, I start speaking really fast because I think in Spanish I feel that I speak faster, but then people are not able to understand me. So it's like, okay, you need to slow down so they can understand what they're
Yes.
saying.
Mm-hmm.
Or like if I go to the grocery store and they ask me for my name, if I say it like kind of like Gabriela, they're like, "Excuse me, what did you say?" And so then I just have to say, "Is Gabriela," and then they understand what I'm saying. So it's
Yeah.
interesting. I'm guessing that's what like happens when you need to switch between Aussie English and Indian.
Absolutely. That's it. It's so good that you've given this example about your name. I have to do this. So, uh, whenever I go to a coffee shop or give my name, I used to say my name in my accent, Amanda. They would say, "How do you spell it?" Amanda. But the way I say a, the way I move my mouth like this sound doesn't exist in Indian English. They say eh. So they hear a and they hear eh. So my name is Emenda. That's how they write it,
Oh.
Emenda. So then I was going back to Australia one year and I went to get Starbucks and I thought, I'm go I'm going to test saying my name in an Indian English accent. I mean, I was ordering in Hindi anyway, but then when they asked for my name, I just kind of kept the flow because I would normally switch to Amanda. So I just said Amanda, and they got the spelling perfectly.
Wow.
Yeah. Because I live in Punjab and there are a lot of variations of names that start with Aman, Aman. So like Amanveer, Amanpreet, Amandeep, Amanjot, all of these sorts of variations. It's very
Whoa.
common here. But the main thing is Aman is pronounced Aman. So I was like, I'll just say Amanda the way like my in-laws say my name and see if that helps with their spelling. And it does.
Oh, wow, that's so interesting. I can definitely see the whole like adapting to wherever you are. Just a very
Yeah.
simple change, but sometimes, yeah, like it's like sometimes I do things that I'm not aware that I'm doing to
Mm.
adapt until we were
Yeah.
talking, and then I was kind of putting more attention to it. I was like,
Mm.
that's so cool because sometimes we can make it unconsciously, right? But
Yeah.
that is so interesting. And it's perfect for my second question,
Mm.
which is, and I think I remember writing this question because when we were talking, like prepping for this episode, um, I think you said that, there's someone in the entrepreneurship, business circle that's very famous, and someone asked him, um, like, how do I enter the English market or something along those lines? And he was
Mm.
Indian. And then the answer that he gave was a little bit, I guess it's very logical, but then at least emotionally, I'm like, it's a little bit conflicting, at least for me. But the question is, communication, you said that communication is 50% the listener's job to listen, and then
Mm-hmm.
50% the speaker's job to speak at 100%. Can you
Mm.
break that down for us? Like, what do you
Yeah.
mean?
Yes. So you are referring to the Alex Hermosi clip, I think, where, yeah, the Indian asked, how can we land American clients? And he said, speak like an American. And I was like, oh, I don't know how I feel about that. That's a little bit. Yeah. This is accent bias. at the end of the day. But look, everyone has a different goal for wanting to improve their pronunciation or speak with a different way. No judgment to them, what their goals
Mhm.
are. But yes, what you're saying is that I believe that there's a 50-50 rule here in that communication is a two-way street. As a speaker, so your job is 50% of this communication, and your job is to just try your 100% at speaking better. Clear pronunciation, having the appropriate speed, using good intonation and tonality, so the emotion in your voice to get your point across. As a listener, your job is to try and listen at 100%. So do 100% of your job of listening. So be
Mhm.
patient, be willing to understand a different accent.
Mhm.
Think about those maybe unconscious biases that you might have about accents. But I think the problem when a migrant goes to a different country is that a lot of pressure gets put on them to do 100% of speaking and listening. And whereas it needs to work both ways. And a lot of people don't realize that. You see comments online all the time. You hear people say, speak English, we speak English here. These people are speaking English, but you also,
Mhm.
as a listener, have to make an effort to listen better, basically, and be a
Yeah.
patient communicator.
Yeah. And I I love that because it's recognizing it's not only one side. There's always two people involved in a conversation, so it's up to both sides to do their work. So
Yeah.
I think one of the curious examples is when I was learning English. It was actually around like seventh grade or so because I
Mm,
was in bilingual classes and I only spoke Spanish in all of them. And so once it came to seventh grade, I remember I was only one of two people that were like Spanish speakers, and I remember I was just dropped in there, and then I remember I could not understand what anyone was saying. It was just English, and I remember I had to like really focus to just even clearly understand the words that were coming out. And then
yeah.
after a while, then I was like, okay, they're saying apple or books. I was like, okay, I can clearly understand what they're saying now. It's like about translating that in my head as to what they mean.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I thought that was a very interesting concept that you brought up
Mm,
because they could be speaking English, but the other side could not understand because maybe they haven't been exposed to it.
yeah.
Like at least here in the area where we live, a lot of people are English is their second language, but those that
Mm,
English is their first language, they've been exposed to it that they're so nice and they're like they even try
yeah.
to learn Spanish. And
Oh, that's lovely.
I think that like helps build the confidence of that person that's trying to
Yeah.
improve their English because they
Yeah.
feel motivated to speak it and give it a try. And they're
Yeah.
nice about like correcting them instead of like shaming them, which
Mm,
if you do that, well, you're not gonna try to speak it as often.
exactly. Yeah. No, exactly right. And that's how communication should be, honestly. And it makes me so sad when, you know, you see these kind of videos online. And I feel like for migrants, they have it so tough in so many ways. And in the sense, and again, it comes down to accent bias, where, people maybe are speaking their mother tongue outside with their friends, but they've been speaking English all day at work and they're exhausted. So they want to speak in
Mm,
their mother tongue. Totally relatable. So then people are saying, speak English, we speak English here. But then there are people who are actively learning English. Maybe they're not advanced English speakers. People will get angry at them for not speaking good English. And then,
mhm,
they start to get better, and then someone else will get upset at them for not, having a clearer accent. So people just can't win. And I think
mhm,
as long as
mhm,
you're trying your best and you know you are doing your best, that's all you can give. But
mhm, mhm,
as, as an Australian, when I was in Australia, it was important for me to make sure that I was doing my best at listening and really
mhm,
making an effort to understand when I was speaking with people whose first language wasn't English. I used to work in a call center, so it happened quite a bit.
Mm.
And knowing that if someone couldn't understand me as a speaker, I had to slow down and really
Mhm.
try to make an effort for them to understand me. And that's how communication should be. But people don't always see it that way. I think, I'm not sure about the States, but like in Australia, I think people feel very entitled and they
Mm.
just think that people need to change everything about them. And I hate the word assimilation because to me, assimilation means trying to change everything about who you are and change literally everything to assimilate. I think the correct word is adaptation or adapting.
Mhm.
So you are adapting to the local culture while still being proud of where you're from and your own culture and your own language and finding ways to have the best of both worlds, essentially.
Yeah, yeah, no, I agree. I when you say that word in my head, it's like eliminating who you are and sort of starting from
Yeah.
scratch to look
Yeah.
like them, whoever that group might be.
Yeah.
I Because there was an era here in the States, and maybe I would have to look more into it. I think here in the South, actually in Texas,
Mm-hmm.
where I think there was a lot of maybe not, I would have to look. But the Spanish community felt very attacked. And so
Mm.
what the parents started doing is teaching their children only English, no Spanish. And so a lot of people, they're now around like 60s, I think. And so when I see their skin color and everything, I think they're Hispanic. Well, they are Hispanic. So, but I assume that they speak Spanish. And so I start talking to them in Spanish, and they're like, I'm sorry, I can understand it, but I can't speak it. And this is why. Like, they have a history of it. And I'm
Yeah.
like, wow, they were just trying to protect you, right? So you wouldn't
Yeah.
get, shamed and, go through that negative experience that your parents
Yeah.
had to go through. But I guess it can have a big impact in a negative way
Yeah.
if it's not approached correctly within society.
Mm.
But I do love how your perspective on it's both sides, and it's like we need to work together, because both sides give benefits to each other. And it's just, I think it makes culture more rich, right? Because you learn from different backgrounds, how we do
Yeah.
different things.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think as a whole, we just need to work on that a little bit more.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely. And what you were saying before about essentially whole generations not knowing their mother tongue, the same thing happened in Australia with the Europeans. After World War II, Australia kind of opened its doors and was inviting people from Europe to migrate to Australia because they were worried that they weren't going to grow as a population because they lost so many soldiers during World War II. So a lot of Europeans migrated post World War II to escape war torn Europe. A lot of Greeks, Germans, Italians, that sort of thing. And
Mm.
yeah, I know a girl, she does what I do. She does what I, yeah, sorry, she does what I do. She teaches Australian English, though, more generally, but through Italian to Italian speakers. But she never learnt Italian growing up. So her
Wow.
parents immigrated, not post World War II, I don't think, but they did immigrate from Italy, but they experienced such racism that they didn't they didn't speak Italian at home. They didn't speak Italian to my friend and her siblings, that she never learnt it growing up. And so she learnt it as an adult. And now she's fluent, but her brother's not because he never put in that effort to learn.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's just so interesting what it can lead to in history
Yeah.
just from that situation. It's wow, it's crazy. I guess
Yeah.
getting more into like I guess technical question. So you
Mm.
mentioned that accent training is a skill
Hmm.
or pronunciation, and feel free to correct me.
Yeah.
Like any other communication skill, walk us through how refinement actually builds confidence and reduces
Hmm.
that exhausting cycle of repetition, which I had to do myself from time to time.
Yeah. Yes. So as I was saying before, when you get asked to repeat yourself over and over again, it starts to chip away at that confidence inside you because you start to question, is it my English? Is it my grammar? Is it my pronunciation or accent? What is it? Why am I not being understood? So when that happens again over and over and over again, it really starts to wear you down. That's one part of how it can be exhausting. Also, rehearsing sentences in your head before you speak to make sure that you're saying it correctly, that, you're using proper grammar, that, you have all these things going on. That's mentally exhausting because you're pre-planning a whole conversation in your mind before it actually happens, right?
Yeah.
Avoiding phone calls, staying quiet in group conversations. So every time these things sort of happen, you start to think, I don't belong here. This is too hard. Is it ever going to get easier? Why did I leave my home country? So when that happens enough, you really start to question your whole existence in that country of what you're doing, whether it was the right decision. Refinement helps break that cycle. So by fixing the specific pronunciation patterns that might cause that communication breakdown, you start hearing, sorry, can you repeat that? Less. So your confidence starts to build up. You don't need to start rehearsing so much in your mind because it starts to become natural through the repetition of learning and practicing. Also, when you start to work on these areas, you stop dreading meetings, you stop that mental practice or that mental rehearsal before speaking, and eventually that mental load lifts. So it's not so exhausting anymore.
Mm-hmm. And I think I don't know if you've come across this, but sometimes in their head, they think that either their accent, their pronunciation is really bad,
Mm,
but actually it is not. But they have that idea in their head.
mm,
Um, and it's like, because again, I wasn't aware that there were teachers that just focus in these areas, but I was like, I wish I had known this sooner because I would feel I
mm,
would have taken advantage of it. Because from my understanding, y'all give an assessment, right? Of like, hey, these are your
mm.
weak areas. This is where we can
Yeah,
improve,
yeah.
just like any other subject. And I was like, that would be so cool because I recently went to a networking event and there was this guy that he's here from America. He moved to Brazil, I think, for like
Mm,
6 months, and like he loves to travel in Latin America, so he speaks Spanish. And so we start chatting in Spanish, and then he's like, "Oh, so English is that like your first language?" And I was like, "No, it's actually my second." And he's like, your English is perfect. Like you have no accent in Spanish or English. And I was like, thank you. Like that's not what I think in my head.
mm.
But like those little things like kind of it does build my confidence up, but I sometimes you're very harsh on your own self
Yeah.
for nothing.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. And I think as well, what we were saying earlier in the conversation about the exposure or even lack of exposure. So, if you're being asked to repeat yourself, automatically your mind goes to accent, but it could just be maybe that person wasn't paying attention. So they're asking you to repeat themselves because they actually didn't hear you.
Mm,
Or maybe they haven't had a lot of exposure to someone who has your accent. Like my situation here in India, people don't have a lot of exposure to Australian accents. They have more exposure to American shows, movies, even, like K dramas are dubbed in American English. So they have more of this exposure to the American accent, not Australian. So
mhm,
it could be that they just
mhm,
they need their time to catch up to what you're saying and process because they're not used to that accent. Maybe you
mhm,
spoke really fast. Maybe you spoke really soft. There are so many things that could be going on, but you're right. We are really harsh on ourselves. So our mind goes to it's the accent. So
mhm,
the idea of what I do, we have this assessment, it's live, or I also do a voice recording one. And I go through and highlight, these are areas you can improve on, and these are areas you're doing well. And then we also incorporate with my one-on-one program, we incorporate things like working on slowing your pace down, increasing your pitch, adding more emotion to your voice too, so that people stay sort of engaged when you're talking. So all of these things come together.
wow. And do you think from because something that I notice is that you're very passionate about this subject, which I love that, right? Because you teach it,
Thank
you
you.
embrace it, and it's like, do you think you understand people that go through this more because you are in a way actually experiencing this living in India and Indian not be Hindi not being your first language where like you've had to do all of these things. What is your experience there?
I think so. And I've come across a lot of ESL teachers who live abroad and are learning another language, and I think it makes us more relatable and empathetic to our clients or student situations. So I can definitely relate to what it's like moving away from my home country, leaving everything, moving to a new country, having to learn the language, the culture, adapting. I talk about this a little bit on Instagram, and when I do share this vulnerable side of moving abroad, I get so many messages from people saying, "Thank you so much. I thought I was the only one. You know, you can really relate to us." So I do talk about that a little bit more because people feel seen. And, they
Yeah.
just want to feel seen, right? Like there's this something. Before I actually say this, what age did you leave Mexico? How old
So
were you?
I was a baby. I was 3 years old.
Okay.
And so that's
Yeah.
why I think it's so funny. At least for me, it's like, but I learned English until seventh grade. How is that possible? Right? But it's just, so I guess to give more context for the audience, there was a Spanish, well, there was a program here when I was young called, well, actually, I don't remember the name, but the whole thing was for to get groups of students that only spoke English and those who only spoke Spanish together, so both
Mm.
could, learn from both sides. Blah
Oh,
blah
that's
blah.
cool.
In theory, that's a good
Yeah.
idea. For some reason, the Spanish kids overpowered that group. So for the English kids, they learned Spanish so well, where even
Yeah.
now, if I meet them, like they don't have an accent in Spanish so
Yeah.
perfect. But then that led to the Spanish kids not learning English until later on because I
Yeah.
think that program, we had a hurricane, schools,
Mm.
some of them were shut down. And
Yeah.
so that program was kind of terminated and then that happened and I
Yeah.
was like, what is this? Because I spoke Spanish at home. And yeah, I think that's where a lot of the I was like kind of would blame it on that circumstance. But it wasn't until
Mm.
going back to the mindset. I remember meeting someone who was from Puerto Rico, one of my friends, and I guess she was like tired of me complaining about that. And she's like, Gabby, you have a good job. You know English and you know Spanish. You don't have an accent. Like, it's fine. Like, you got everything accomplished. You're just like any regular person. And I was like, you know what? That's true. And it's like sometimes dwelling on those experiences and you kind of just need to stop and move forward. Um,
Yeah.
it's just like mindset is so, so important. So even like, I would
Yeah.
say if I was still kind of my old version where I was kind of unconfident, having a
Mm.
teacher like you just to reassure me, like, you're okay, you just need some tweaks,
Yeah.
it would have made such
Yeah.
a difference sooner because it's
Yeah.
all in your head until a certain point.
Yeah. Yeah. Absolutely. And there's something that I think maybe we discussed this in our first call. I think you were saying that sometimes you feel like maybe you're too Mexican for America, but then in America you don't feel Mexican enough. So I feel like this a little bit in the sense that I feel like sometimes I'm still too Australian in
Mm,
India, but then when I go back to Australia, I feel like, oh my gosh, I have adapted so much to India that now I'm feeling out of place in
mhm,
Australia. And I call this like the in between feeling. I feel in between cultures and countries. And I
mhm.
think when I talk about this, a lot of people relate to it. And so, just to go back to your question before about whether that kind of makes me be a better teacher in a way or do what I do in a better aspect, I think it does. Because you need to
Yeah.
really be able to put yourself in someone else's shoes, which I am already actually doing.
Yeah, because I think consciously, like I guess if I love a topic and I follow that person, I'm like, they're like they know this subject 100%, like they're untouchable. That's just kind of a thing I'm working through, right? But it's like
Yeah.
I've been like, when I read books, I reach out to those people, send them a message, they reply,
Mm.
so they're humans just like me. But
Yes.
when I was because I follow you on LinkedIn, and that's kind of the platform where I usually spend most of my time.
Mm.
And yeah, you just become so relatable, so approachable, because you know, go back and forth in conversations in the comments. And
Mm.
there was, I think you replied to a person in Hindi, so you wrote it, and then that person replied back, and they were like, "You actually say this way because of blah blah blah." And then you replied back, and I was like, "Oh, that's so cool. Like, she's actually like going through this process too." So if
I
I
know
had to
exactly the
decide
comment you're
between
talking
yours,
about as
I
well.
would go with you.
Yeah, so it was I remember thanking someone in Hindi on this podcast episode I did. I said thank you for the conversation or the good talk. It was good talk. And talk as a noun is baatcheet, I think, and that's a feminine word. And so I was supposed to use the adjective good in the feminine form, which is achi instead of acha, but I wrote acha. And then someone corrected me. And it's actually someone I worked with like, God, 15 years ago in Australia, an Indian guy. And then
Wow.
he did a correction of it's achi, not acha. And I was like, yes, of course. And then I had this realization. I used to hate being corrected because it's an ego thing. So once you kind of move past and drop that ego and know that it's okay to make mistakes, that's how you're going to learn. And I see
Mm-hmm.
it from so many people learning Hindi or Punjabi, the language of where I live, where they'll say to me, "You're so confident in Hindi," because on my personal page, I post a lot speaking in Hindi and I'm making so many mistakes. But, and I say to them, it's because I don't care about making mistakes anymore. That's
Mm-hmm.
when I can come across more confident knowing I make mistakes because then I replay what I've recorded
Oh
and I
yeah.
analyze it. Or I get my husband to check, have I said this right? Or how do I say this? But a lot of people don't, they're too scared to make mistakes. It's holding them back. Doesn't matter what
Mm-hmm.
language you're learning, but it's holding them back.
Mm-hmm. That's so true. I remember for my work, uh, when I started, I didn't have to do like demos with clients, but then we're a startup. So eventually I had to do that. And I remember I think I heard where if you see the recordings, you're able to spot the mistakes, correct them, and then like try it
Yeah.
again in the next call. I remember it took me a while because I would cringe to watch
Yes.
my recordings. But yeah, that that's what led me to like actually learn what I was doing wrong and improve.
Yep.
So yeah,
Yeah.
seeing recordings, and like yeah, people can sense when you're open to feedback and they can give that
Mm,
to you. I mean, if you get angry, they're not gonna give you feedback anymore. Like they're just gonna
exactly.
stop.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
I do think that's very critical. Are there any other, like if someone is listening to us and they're like,
Mm,
Amanda, Gabby, I identify with that. Any things that they can do from their home if they're not ready for a teacher? Any like uh exercises that they can perform or that you
mm.
advise?
So, what you were just saying before, how it was really hard for you to play your recordings back because it's really cringe. Do more of that because that's a barrier that I see people like I would tell my students like you have to send me your weekly homework, but I also want you to record and review yourself because that's the only way that you're going to learn. I do it. That's how I improve my Hindi, but also when I review back my YouTube videos that I make, I catch myself. One video, I was like swaying back and forth. I was standing right here and I was swaying. Oh my God. Like, so then I can work on that. I also realize I say so and like a lot
Mm,
as filler words. So,
mhm,
those are
mhm,
things that I can try and reduce. It's the same for wanting to improve any sort of skill. So, speaking, pronunciation, do more of it, speak to yourself, practice, record, review, reflect. That is the only way you're going to get better because it is a skill to improve this skill, you have to do more of it. There's no way
Mhm.
around it. You just have to do more of it.
Yeah. Okay. You said three words: review, reflect. I didn't catch the other one.
Review, record, review, reflect.
Record, review, reflect. Okay, got it. And that's applicable for anything. Like if you're learning the guitar, you can do that too.
Exactly. It really is applicable for anything. So you can do it for my YouTube videos to check sales calls, anything, language
Hmm.
practice. Yeah, exactly. It's such a valuable practice.
Yeah, yeah, and honestly, what my biggest takeaway from this conversation is the fact that if you have an accent, pronunciation problems that you can improve, there's nothing wrong with you. Embrace
Yeah.
that, be proud of
Mm-hmm.
it, and know that if you want to improve it, you can. There's teachers out there, there's things you can
Yeah.
do by yourself, and like be confident, like
Mm-hmm.
embrace, like own that you have an accent. I think that's
Yeah.
what has shifted recently for me, and that
Mm-hmm.
already when I speak, it just hits different than before when I was
Yeah.
like, ah, so
Yeah.
it has been really impactful to meet you, talk with you on this specific subject. So thank you so much, Amanda.
Thank you.
Any last words you want to give to the audience who are listening to us
Mm-hmm.
today?
Yes. So I think, especially for people in Australia, I'm not so sure about the States, but in Australia, people won't give you feedback unless you ask for it because it's seen as unsolicited or unasked feedback.
Oh.
So if you are wanting to improve your pronunciation, your English skills, anything like that, and you're wondering why people aren't telling you, it's because it's seen as rude. So you have to ask. So if you have someone at work that you're close with or comfortable to speak to, say, hey, I'm working on improving this, whatever it is, grammar, pronunciation, vocabulary, whatever. Can you help me? So,
Mm.
as much as we said before, practice, record, review, reflect, that's a great activity. Put into practice. And if there is someone that you can ask to help you, try and bring the ego down and ask for help. It's okay to ask for help. But also just remember that what you're feeling is real as well. So if you're
Mm.
feeling exhausted and frustrated and feeling like it's impacting your career, we're not invalidating that. These
Mhm.
things are very, very real feelings or situations. So it's not about changing your identity or, changing who you are. It's just focusing on certain parts of your pronunciation to make communication easier. And, those sort of aspects or technical things that can cause breakdowns are learnable skills. You've already learned how to adapt to a different country, learn a language. You've moved to a different country. You've already done all of these things. You know how to learn a new skill. It's just a new skill to learn.
Wow. You said it perfectly. That's amazing. Yeah, and it's
Thank you.
you kind of hit on the culture aspect, right? So every country has different cultures. So in Australia, requesting giving feedback might seem as rude, so you need to ask for it. Here in the
Mm,
States, I will have to think about that. I guess just in
yeah,
general, just if you want feedback, just ask for it. So I think that's a great point to take away on top of the
yeah.
rest. So Amanda, thank you so much for today's
Thanks,
conversation,
Gabby.
for having it so late at night. So thank you for that.
That's okay.
And I will put your information if people want to get in
Mm-hmm.
touch with you in the
Yeah.
notes. And yeah, appreciate the time. And I hope we can maybe have a second conversation later on a deeper topic around this. But yeah, um, to our audience, feel free to put comments and we'll reply to them, follow us back. And yeah, have a great rest of the day and see you next time.
Thank you. Thank you. Thanks, Gabby. Thanks, everyone.